Morning guys, and welcome to the round 14 review of Footy Rants. It seems like an age since I've done one of these, just because it's the first time we've experienced a Thursday to Monday round in quite a number of, well, an age really. Yeah, there was a lot of blowout scores, a couple of the upsets that were on the cards came off, and some teams that we thought would kick on a little bit more probably treaded the line a little bit closer than what we would have expected. So if we have a cheeky little look, or we'll switch things over now, we can see the Melbourne Storm are continuing to lead the competition out on 24 points, so they're 2 wins clear of the second place Roosters on 20, Sharks also on 20, and we've got a logjam of teams on 18 points. So we've got the Dragons in 4th, Broncos 5th, Manly 6th, and Cowboys 7th, all on 18 points. So keeping in mind that's actually all tied for 4th. 8th spot, rounding out the top 8, is Penrith on 14 points, as is Parramatta. In 10th and 11th and 12th, we have Raiders, Warriors, Bulldogs, all on 12 points. Titans and Rabbitohs on 10, West Tigers 8, and to round out the bottom of the table is Newcastle on 6. So if we get cracking on our highlights package, our first game we saw the Storm come away with a shock 18-13 defeat of the Sharkies. It was a very physical game. I don't think that the Sharks probably anticipated the ambush of the Melbourne Storm in the way that did occur. But again, we see here in that first 2 minutes, Cam Smith comes up with that magical play, as he invariably does, with that 40-20 play within the first couple of sets. And then this first 10 minutes, they just isolated Jaden Brayley excellently. You can see there he gets caught in a one-on-one with Felice Kafusi, and it's too little too late. And then same again, looks to play out the back because they got great shape with Munster there out the back, play short, and Glasby probably scores the easiest try that he'll ever get in his career. But then after that, we see here on the time scale, we're in the 27th minute, and the Sharks finally hit back, and it was in this sort of second half of the first half, a bit of an opportunistic try, a bit of a run against the play, and they come away with the points, and it continued from there. They definitely dominated this latter period, and you sort of got the feeling, the Sharks are such a good second half side. I think they've won something like 5 of 7 games coming from behind. So it was very much not a surprise that they sort of got to the position that they were in. And when they got to this point here, where the Storm only had a 2-point lead, I very much thought that they were sort of going to kick on with the game. But again, they had almost 60-40 possession, so it really is a game that got away for the Sharks. They'll be quite disappointed, and Flanagan sort of alluded to that in the post-match press conference. But again, another sort of worrying sign for the Storm is that 68% completion, so below 70%. If you're going to continue to complete under 70%, you're going to make things a lot harder for yourself. But we see here, Maloney ices that field goal. They get the kickoff back, and they just switched off for a second, and we see it's another, it wasn't just Jaden Brayley that missed there, but yeah, regardless, it is another miss with him involved, and Kafusi gets his second try, which sealed it for the Storm in what was an upset. A couple of, key, the 2 key players really for the Storm were Cameron Smith and Billy Slater, who were the try assisters in all 3 of those tries. It sort of felt at times, and Cameron Smith and Craig Bellamy mentioned it in the post-match press conference, that Slater probably was trying to overplay his hand a little bit. There was a few passes there that he was trying to push, try and get on the outside of players, draw that outside defender in on him to give his outside men some space, and at times the pass probably wasn't on, and he needed to take his medicine a little bit. But it's evident now that with that intent that he had, it's earned him a representative jersey these last 2 weeks that he's dominated play. I think he ended up with, that's 3 try assists in 2 games now, might even be more. So Slater and Smith were the key elements for the Storm side. Another standout that I thought performed for the Sharks was Valentine Holmes, and he's obviously got his just deserves now with it with an Origin debut as well. Some of his pickups, there was a missed opportunity that they had where he sort of towed the ball back in for Chad Townsend back on the inside, and then Townsend got the offload back towards Val Holmes, and he picked it up one-handed, pretty much grasped it alongside his right leg, and this was full flight, so it was something pretty to watch. And they'll definitely feel like it was one that got away, but as I said, sort of leading into the game, it's probably fitting for the narrative that'll run out for the remainder of the season with the two grand final teams from last year. They're one apiece now, so it sort of makes for something interesting should they come in contact again in the final series, which you would assume will have to happen at some point. A couple of injuries out the back of that. We've seen Jordan McLean fracture or break his cheekbone with a head clash with teammate Will Chambers. So he got surgery Friday, so the day after. So he's out for the next 4 weeks. And Chase Blair also had a minor ankle surgery, and he'll be out for 3 to 4 weeks as well. So, coming into this Origin period now, we see a few Tim Glasby on debut for Queensland. So that I think that leaves about 5 players out of the Storm lineup. And then you add into the mix now that McLean's got that surgery, and he probably would have been in that blue squad again anyway. And Blair is now out, so that's upwards of 7 players that aren't going to be there for this clash against the Cowboys in round 15. So it's going to make things interesting. It's definitely going to tighten the screws. So obviously a lot of key players out for the Cowboys as well, with both their halves being selected, and now informed back rowers Cooper and Hess both in the fray. So yeah, there's going to be a few challenges come up, and I think it should make for an entertaining game with both sides missing so many representative players. On to the next game. So our first game of Friday night, absolutely dreadful conditions here at Brookvale. So we had Manly come away 18-14 victors over Newcastle, and as I said in the lead up, I think Newcastle wasn't really given a chance in this match just because of their drubbing against Melbourne the week before, but I didn't think they were too far away if they could lay a bit of a platform, and it was their 6, 7 and 9 who really stood up for them this week in Lamb. We see you can get the 40-20 there. Feeney, who scores their first points, and Levi, who was in absolute wars the whole night, went off with HIA. He got falconed about 3 times, I think. And that was always going to be the worry for Newcastle, was whether Dylan Walker could get his running shoes on, and he definitely did that. They create a good bit of space here, and it's just a simple draw and pass for Akili Uate, who's absolutely reveling in playing outside someone of the calibre of Dylan Walker. He's definitely making him look a lot better than he is at his age anyway, and considering the form that he was bringing to the club. But yeah, it's good to see just a bit of desperation. There wasn't really much on there for that try that we see from Jalen Feeney. Just sort of toes it through, gets another little toe, and yeah, just pushing up on the footy. From that point, I still very much felt like Newcastle were in the game. They've led a couple of times at halftime and gone on to lose, but even though they only held that 2-point lead, what ultimately cost Manly from making this a more convincing win was just their execution. Their forwards had laid such a good ground game. We had Tapau, again, 19 hit-ups, 233 metres. Lawrence and Travojevic, 110 and 152 metres respectively. But the outside backs failed to execute. So seeing Kelly put one down and Wright puts one down. So, when your forwards are trying to establish that sort of lead for you like that, and this is really what cost Newcastle the game, was that Uate try. How that didn't go upstairs, I've got no idea. But again, you can sort of cry poor as a Newcastle fan, but on the other side, if you're a Manly supporter, you're like, well, if our guys execute in the way that they should have, it's game on. But it's good to see Newcastle, make a fist of it for all intents and purposes, down 10 points. They could have just sort of put the cue in the rack, but they weren't afraid to go at them and try and steal a win. And they were pretty close to doing so. But yeah, as I was alluding to earlier, when you set a platform like that for Manly, you've just got to go out and get the job done as an outside back. You can't be expecting these big boppers to go round and around and around and around bust their ass because they've got 10, 20 kilos on a lot of you outside backs, and then you fail to execute like that. It's very frustrating for a forward. Raps that I wanted to give was to Jacob Saifidi. He only played half a game, 18 hit-ups, 146 metres, 18 tackles. That's the sort of input you want. He was the only forward that cleared 100 metres and did so convincingly for Newcastle. So, Starling and Daniel Saifidi, they really need to stand up. It's just not good enough as a starting front rower to not accumulate that sort of workload. Like, you just need to find the work. And in a sloppy, wet game like that, it was definitely on the cards to be able to do so. Other honourable mentions, again, Matautia Fitzgibbon-Barnett, who I said that was sort of going to be the linchpin of that Newcastle forward pack, and whether or not they'd be able to stick with them, and they definitely did. They all played 80 minutes and 108 tackles between the three of them. So, I think Newcastle are thereabouts. Like I said, week after week, they're definitely moving closer to that next victory, and I sort of felt a little bit for them, but that they've just got to make sure that they're capitalising on those opportunities. So, when Manly fails to execute on those points, that's when they need to establish a field position and go and score some points of their own, rather than, sort of just waiting on things a little bit more. So being a bit more proactive in respondents. The second game of Friday night, we had the Broncos up against the Rabbitohs. It was a bit of a seesawing affair. It took a little while for both teams to sort of figure each other out. It was very, I guess, sort of cliche in the essence that it was the forwards going toe-to-toe with each other in the physicality of the match. And we've seen here, like I said from the outset, let the memes reign for this game, seeing Nikorima almost in the exact same position that Ben Hunt was in the 2015 Grand Final, spill the beans like that. So they would have been absolutely ripping into him there. And this is just the outside backs executing in the way that Manly should have executed. I know completely different conditions. It was only a little bit dewy. There had been a shower or two, but Corey Oates doing what Corey Oates does, and big body just sort of gets over the line. And I thought the energy that Sims brought in starting was a clever move. You sort of got to fight fire with fire when you got three big middles in the Burgess brothers starting for the Rabbitohs. And we're seeing here that Reynolds' kicking game was definitely getting back, to where it should have been. They ended up scoring 2 tries in this fashion, close to the post, and I sort of like that. Not going all the way out to your wingers, it sort of creates a little bit of confusion, getting players outside of their comfort zone. Excuse me, frog in my throat this morning. It sort of conflicts certain players to try and perform a role that they're not used to doing, especially if you try and isolate that back rower or a 5/8, which is what they did with Nikorima on a couple of occasions. And we see here, they did really, really well in isolating Nikorima. I think he ended up with somewhere close to 6 missed tackles. And then, it just ended up in an arm wrestle. You couldn't doubt the effort, and what a bone rattler that was from Gillett. That was sort of my favourite play of the entire game. But you just sort of felt, again, it sort of comes back to that winning culture that the Broncos have developed over decades now, that they sort of just find a way to win, and the form that the Rabbitohs are currently experiencing, they just don't really know how to ice the cake. It's not so much pinpointing an area of a game. It's probably just a few little individual efforts at times that sort of cost them. And it was just a small period of time. I think it was only 6 minutes where they scored these 2 tries, the Bronx, and it just put them on the back foot. And then after this, we've seen Milford go down with his shoulder dislocation. There's a nasty one there. You see it sort of get all extended. I've unfortunately experienced that all too many times myself. It was good to see the Rabbitohs respond to that straight away. They scored their points and were making a fist of it, but it just wasn't enough. And we see here that had the chance get over the line, they square things up. So that was the second try from Reynolds, and then they have their opportunity right at the end of another Reynolds kick, but it doesn't really pay dividends in the way that it probably should have. So again, Broncos, still just chipping away, and it's good that they're getting these wins, especially coming into Origin period. It's important that they just accumulate those tough wins. They've had two really close games with the Rabbitohs now, so that's a 6-point victory there, and they had a 1-point victory earlier in the season. So yeah, it must be frustrating for Maguire. You could definitely see his demeanour in the post-match press conference was a lot lighter this week. He definitely wasn't frustrated or despondent. You've seen the delivery that he gave in the weeks prior, and it definitely was apparent that he was concerned with their effort and thoroughly frustrated. But you could definitely tell that it was there tonight. On that night, I should say. But it's just those small lapses in concentration. Again, Crichton and Burgess sort of leading the way for the forwards. I'm not sure whether Sutton is the long-term option at 6 for the Bunnies. You probably need someone with a bit more spark. It'll be interesting to see how much longer they continue to leave Cody Walker out the back. His involvement was still very high. I think he ended up with over 20 carries of the football at fullback, which is definitely the sort of involvement that you want. But yeah, surely they've got to be looking at trying to recruit someone who's a bit more of a genuine half. Don't get me wrong, Sutton is an absolute legend of the game. He's been around, but I just feel like when he's not on, he's really not on. He really sort of lacks any. It just puts that much more pressure on Reynolds, and I think that's where they're going to struggle to continue to try and grind out wins, and probably why they don't. When Reynolds isn't on, as he hasn't been in the last few weeks, he definitely was. That was probably his best game in over a month. But you can still see that wasn't quite enough. Moving on to the next game. Finally, the Warriors kick in Australia. So their first win away from home this season against the Titans, and yeah, that now makes it 13 from 14 wins against the Titans, and that's their 7th straight win on the Gold Coast. Things looked ominous early on here. We see that they got stripped on the edge there, and just good support. And we see, there's 5 Titans players around the footy there to queue up for that try. But they settled well, and I think, that they did pretty much the same as what they did in that Parramatta game. They were down 12-0 and rallied and got themselves right back in the contest, which was pleasing to see. But the thing that excited me most here was bodies in motion. It was good to see Hoffman there in his 300th game. He gets the cookies, scored the first try for the Warriors. But Foran getting his hands on the ball more in a first receiver role. So you see there, he's kicking. He was the pass in the link to Johnson in the lead up to Hoffman's try. I love seeing half to half passing. Nothing frustrates me more than seeing halves confined to their own specific edge. Yes, you're going to have probably dominance, but I love seeing them square up, and it just sort of freed Johnson up a little bit more. He ended up with 3 try assists. I just think when he doesn't have to stress so much about carrying the team, and Foran's been there for a number of weeks now, but I sort of felt like they changed those roles a little bit in the last few weeks, and we see Foran on that sweep play executed to perfection. So I think the more that Foran actually plays that pivot role is going to benefit the Warriors, because then you can just sort of let Johnson go and do his thing. Another good try here from Tuivasa-Sheck, doing what every good fullback should be doing, and that's just looming up in and around the ruck with his forwards, and especially at that point late in the half, there's definitely some tied ruckies for the Gold Coast Titans. This is where I sort of started to get a little bit stressed, even though they were up by 20 points here, the Warriors 24-4. Hayne goes over. It's only first 5 minutes of the second half. It's exactly how you would want to respond, being Neil Henry. But yeah, just little things like this. You can't afford to keep turning possession over to a Warriors outfit who are so frivolous and able to move forward. So they did lose, no doubt, momentum once Foran did go off there, and it was just good to see some bodies in motion for Shaun Johnson. When Johnson's forced to work a little bit harder and try and be creative and spontaneous on his own, that's when they really, really struggle. And it was good to see that the Warriors answered back. They had that little bit of a lapse and let the Warriors score. let the Titans score, sorry, but then they hit back and nailed the game. And yeah, it was good to see Hoffman sort of kick that goal at the end there to celebrate and cap off. So yeah, completions ended 80%, 86% for the Warriors. So that's probably one of their highest, I'd assume, for the season, and that's obviously going to go a long way, especially in wet conditions for the Warriors side. Yeah, the try assist from Johnson is probably the most pleasing for me, and the way that he's using Mannering to come out on that edge and link up with Hoffman is very, very good. And we'll see in the Cowboys game a little bit later that Cooper and Hess do the same for Hess's try. Yeah, so it was pleasing signs for the Warriors. It was good to see them finally come out, and I really hope, and I'm sure a lot of you rugby league fans out there, you get frustrated seeing such a good team on paper continue to struggle for form. And, a side like that, to go out and put, 34 points to 12 victory over a team like the Titans, who has like Jared Haynes and Conrad Hurrells and, the exciting ability of Ash Taylor and Kane Elgey, it's good to see them go out and perform like that. For the Titans, Ash Taylor probably had a game that he'd rather forget. Kicking game was really off in all facets. Didn't kick a goal either, so that was 3 unconverted tries. But yeah, I think for the Titans, they're in a bit of a pickle now that it sort of looks like they got a little bit too big for their boots, sticking it to a few of the top 4 sides about a month ago, and that's 3 straight losses, I believe. So they're really dwindling, and if they copper another defeat this weekend, they're really, really starting to test the boundaries as to whether or not they're putting that cue in the rack and their season's just about done. You can't write anyone off yet. There is still a number of games to be played, and a good solid run of form will still see you get home. But you want to start staying in touch, especially now that there has been that little gap bridged within the top 8. Pretty much that 8th position is the only super viable spot that's still available for these teams that are struggling at the moment. So looking for the Warriors to pick up where they laid the platform for this match after their bye this weekend, and the Titans very much need to respond and get back towards moving into that top 8. Into the second game of Super Saturday, we had the Penrith Panthers up against the Canberra Raiders. The Panthers, geez, they stole one here. They played in Bathurst. It seems like it's something that these two clubs are going to continue to do, and I think it's good for the country, the regional towns, continue spreading that rugby league love. And we've seen here, I sort of alluded to the fact that it was disappointing to see the Raiders rely so heavily on Rapana against Manly, and it sort of looked like he was going to do the same. He absolutely dominated. It was all Rapana for the first 10 minutes. It wasn't just that try that we seen just before. It was also another carry that he had out of his back end. He just couldn't be claimed. And we're just seeing Matt Moylan now. He got absolutely dropped there by BJ Lalua, but he scored the first try in response, and he's just doing a phenomenal job at the moment, just getting on the outside of players, and just the runners around him are giving him time, and he's looking to execute much sort of like Keary and Widdop do as well. And we see here a bit of a Barney at the end of the first half there. Harry Naira sort of lost his cool a little bit and sort of went, there was really no option for the referees here but to give both of them a spell. And I don't mind it. I like seeing it. It's good to. It just shows me that both teams care. And we see that Penrith were the first respondents in the second half. Cleary runs away with this one. It's good to see Cleary scoring these sorts of tries. He does score a lot of them, and it's exactly what you want. Support play, much like Pearce and Keary do very, very well for the Roosters. And if they can continue to perform like that, Cleary and Moylan, they're going to have a lot of success. So we've seen Penrith jump out to a 12-4 lead here at the start of the second half. Kotrick responds, just putting a pressure under the young fullback of Dylan Edwards, and they come up trumps, and they're unlucky not to get one here. We see Baptiste in his first game for the year. He's recovered really, really well. Probably didn't really expect him to see him this early, if at all, this season. but he's a bit of a fibber here, and we'll see. And he's just bobbled it there. So yeah, I think they definitely got away one there, Penrith, but just the contest on the footy that this right edge has, Whitehead, Leilua and Rapana, they're just sheer competitors, and I think in a lot of instances, that's 90% of the battle. If you just want it more than your opposition, you couple that with the relationship that you now have of this right edge, and they've played that much footy together, it's hard not to start executing in this way. And we're starting to see that on the opposite side now. Kotrick and Croker really starting to form a combination, and the offload there from Croker was sublime, and the finishes from these wingers in every team in the NRL are just getting more and more ridiculous. And you probably sort of wrote them off there once it got to 2012 and it got in that arm wrestle, even though there was still time on the clock for Penrith. I just didn't really see a win being manufactured. But for the last 2 minutes, I didn't watch the post-match press conference with Ricky Stewart, but I can only imagine the disappointment and undoubtedly some element of anger in there that they threw away a game, and a team like Penrith now, who's had a winning month of football, that's 4 on the trot, and to steal one like that, I think it's a good culmination of victories. You know, they built their first 2 wins, only played a half of footy and came back and annihilated teams. Last week we've seen a full 80-minute performance, which got them a deserved result of a 38-0 scoreline against the Bulldogs. And now in this 4th game, they were really pushed to the limit with, you know, arguably the best right edge in the competition, who can very much spark something from nothing. And they hung tight, back their system, and it was good to see some leadership being taken from Moylan. I think this is an area now that he's able to exploit much better as a leader. He's touching the football a lot more, with more quality. You know, he's not trying to jump on the back of these sweet plays, or it almost looks like he tries to override with his leadership when he was playing fullback, just because there probably wasn't that full confidence in Cartwright as the genuine 6 on that side. And now that Cartwright isn't there and he's able to sort of do his thing because that's his true responsibility, we're seeing someone with the flair and excitement of Dylan Edwards being able to revel in his opportunities at the back. So I think it's sort of a win-win for the Panthers. And again, I think you know, once Cartwright is good to go, I still think he is too good not to be in the side, but now we'll probably see him used where I think he should be playing his footy. He's not a 6, he's a back rower, he's a ball runner, and he's going to, you know, given space, he can create something from there. You know, he can get that offload away, or he does have that kicking game, sort of like Wade Graham does. But for those assets to come out and shine, I think he needs to be playing in that back row position where he's given the space, not where he's looking to create the space. I think that's the stark contrast of Cartwright playing in that position. That's about all that I had from that. You know, Penrith, 17 more missed tackles, 5 errors, and on the end of 18-7 offload. So, you know, the Raiders very much had the opportunities to win that game, and losing by 4, and looking at those 3 key stats, you shouldn't really be giving wins away like that in the NRL. But one little note that I've made here, that just the youth of this Penrith team is very much playing into their hands at the moment. There's something about the balance that can be played at times. We see early on in the season that the youth and inexperience cost them, because they're still sort of learning little bits and pieces and relying a little bit too much on that flair. But at the same time, when you have that youth and inexperience, especially in today's age, and the ability to sort of come onto the scene and get results straight away, you almost just lose this ability to care. Like, you just don't care what the media says that you know, this opposition player is so good and they carry these sort of secret weapons. You just sort of rock up, and what I find with guys that sort of play at this higher end of footy, they don't tend to really get sucked into what's going on in the competition too much. They don't overthink things. You know, the conversations that I've had with guys, you know, I'm very much, obviously, what is why I'm doing this podcast. I love the game so much, and I love analysing stats and looking, you know, ahead with which teams are playing who in the coming weeks. But I can very much see how that would send you into overwhelm if you were a player and you were trying to keep on top of that too often, and it probably wouldn't really allow you to focus on the job at hand, because the conversations that I have with a lot of guys that play, they don't really watch the game that much, or, you know, that they study tape because that's their job, very much so, but they're not using it out of an entertainment sort of view, because that is their job. But they don't get overawed in the way that, you know, certain sides do this Penrith team. Like, yes, the results haven't really gone their way at the start of the season, but now we're starting to see that youth is really starting to come out, and it's just good to see. You know, I know I got frustrated with them a few weeks prior to this winning streak, and I was tipping them almost every week, and they were failing to come up with results. But I always wanted to see, probably them and the Warriors. I want to see those teams playing well, because they are entertaining. Like, when you see teams on paper and you're like, this is what they can do, you want to see that happen. You don't want to just be like, oh, I told you so. Like, they never perform anyway. Like, it's just the way that their culture's being built. So yeah, it was good to see Penrith kick on and get their fourth straight win. So it'll be interesting to see where they take things from here. I'm going to be a little bit biased. Yes, the Cowboys are up. JT was back. I was super excited. I had sort of had my doubts, you know, with that man there on screen, Corey Norman, coming back as well, and we see him come up with an absolute stinker, which pleased me. And then Thurston responds like this in his first sort of key involvement in the game, and then puts Felt over just 6 minutes into the game. So this one was played up in Darwin. It sort of filled me with a little bit of confidence especially once Thurston was named and cleared to play. Just his involvements on the footy, you couldn't really fault the man. They're unlucky to not get given this one as well, and rightly so. Ethan Lowe blows up here. I thought, Takaranga very much takes his own player and Raja out. For me, that's play on. But anyway, you're not going to complain about those things in a 32-6 victory. But yeah, just the involvements, it just shows how influential a player like Jonathan Thurston is. And I think this play here just seals Cohen Hess's jersey. Doesn't give a shit. And, you see Brown running there, and Hess just doesn't care. And I think the reason why I got away from it was because that's... If I'm seeing a half get tackled like that off the footy, that's how I want to see him get tackled. It's a tackle. It wasn't a dog shot. It wasn't a shoulder charge. There was no swinging arms. It was just like, I know how to defend properly, and I'm going to hurt you. Again, just that kicking game really exploited Radradra there, and I need to just replay this try. So that we're going to have a little bit of a look. For those just listening, we're just looking at the Thurston solo try. Sorry guys, I sort of skipped back a little bit too far. Alright, so we'll play it through here. So you can see Hampton here at 9. He throws a long ball, so you can already see that Thurston is going on a bit of an overs line, and that's just going to get him on the outside of the B defender, who you can see here is already trailing. So they're already staggered in the line. And we play that through. You see there, French has had to rush up, and then Matangi there, he's stuck behind. So we've got this stagger here. So 1, 2, 3. And because he's got shape back on the inside here with Hess, and we all know that the destructive attacking capabilities that Hess possesses, and now that Brown hasn't trailed on the inside and French has rushed up, having Hess there is just going to hold him, and that gives Thurston time. And we see that, takes the dummy, and then it's just that left foot step, left, right, good night. So again, yeah, just a bit of a masterclass there. And again, we see get on the outside, so we'll just play that through. So again, we see this sort of staggered shape. So there's any time that your outside defenders get in front of your inside, that just allows these attacking players, either side of the ball player, options. It gives them time to make decisions and make the defence make even more poor decisions because Moses is rushed out. So this is the first error. Moses again, no fucking surprise. If anyone was going to fuck this up in the Parramatta side on this edge, it was going to be Mitchell Moses. And I said that in the preview that I thought Gavin Cooper was a massive chance of scoring a try in this game. He actually didn't, but that's because they ended up playing Hess in this roving lock role, and I really liked it. It definitely paid dividends to have Cooper, Hess, and Lowe on the field at the same time. So we'll sort of get through here. And this is another thing that I wanted to mention. This edge was completely new. So Avara and Hoffman were both out. So he had Davis and Gutherson on the edge. And Gutherson ended up having to make 22 tackles in this game. And I think Moses ended up with another 6 missed tackles. So it just goes to show how much extra work and pressure Gutherson took upon himself to try and protect this bloke who still can't defend at this level. And I'm probably gonna bring this up every round for the rest of the year until he fucking gets dropped. Because if I'm Brad Arthur and we get pumped like that, something needs to change. And for me, it's Mitchell Moses, because that's where the fucking tries and points keep getting leaked. Last week we seen it was Mannering and Hoffman score against him. And again, he doesn't even end up committing. We'll play this through. He doesn't lay hands on fucking anyone. It's pretty poor. So from there, we've finally sort of squared things up. But now that we've got runners coming through, so we see Gavin Cooper's going to run this short line. We're going to hold him up. Edwards is just going to try and go get at Thurston because he's not worried about anything else other than trying to fucking smash Jonathan Thurston. And he does land him, which is good. Then he pushes through the line. But because he's held that ball up, Gutherson's going to stay out because now they're man on. So technically, Gutherson would have called Moses to take Hess, and then now we've got man on. So it's back to a 3-on-3. So you've got to make your one-on-one tackles, and Moses fucking chooses no one. So, you know, what do you do as Coach Brad Arthur? Like, that's just really, really disappointing. They get stripped on this edge again. That's just simple hands, isolating numbers on the edge. Probably just a little bit of inexperience in the partnership there between Gutherson and Davis. You know, they finally did get over for some points here. Good to see Takarangi. That was a good individual effort. Still had plenty of work to do. Was by no means a piece of cake. And then the Cowboys did go on to get another one after that. So a really, really good victory for the Cowboys with the return of Jonathan Thurston. It definitely shows what a team of the Cowboys is capable of and should be winning against teams that are a bit lower in this top 8. But again, it's going to be about consistency and now getting outside, getting through this origin period. They come up against a Storm, so it's very much going to be a reserve grade performance and one that they'll be confident. You know, it's not like they're coming up against a team that is relatively unaffected by origin. And I think it's a very good decision in the makeup of the draw by the NRL to put these two clubs together. You sort of anticipated that being so heavily involved in the Queensland outfit that it would make sense to pair these guys up. And I think both coaches, Green and Bellamy, will be very appreciative that both sides are being given equal opportunities to come out and win this match. Yeah, there wasn't really too much more that I wanted to say on top of that match, other than it was good to see the performance of Sean Fensom off the bench for the Cowboys. I think I had down here, it was something ridiculous. 7 out of 10 Cowboys forwards ran up for over 100 metres. So, you know, you're not going to have too many bad days. And when your outside backs are executing in the way that Kyle Felt did off the kicking game that Jonathan Thurston displayed, that's the scoreline that you're going to inevitably end up with, which was pleasing. But yeah, I don't think Sean Fensom's too far away from stripping that starting spot away from John Asiata. So we'll see what happens there, and it wouldn't surprise me if they try and use Asiata a little bit differently in this next game against the Storm, which may open the door for Sean Fensom. Into our only game for Sunday, which was the Roosters and the Tigers. The scoreline probably doesn't really do the Tigers justice. I think I used the term in expectance of a bloodbath by the Roosters in this encounter, but I don't think it was so much that the Tigers played overly well. I think it was a case of the Roosters played overly bad. They completed at 60%, completed at 60%, 20 errors in comparison to the Tigers' 11. So when you give teams opportunities like that, and then we've seen before, Jake Frenton went off almost instantaneously from the start of the game, which saw Connor Watson get his opportunity, and boy, didn't he grab the ball by the horns when he did get his chances. Ended up with 2 tries, as did Aiden Guerra. But yeah, just a few individual shows of brilliance. This was a fantastic try, good support play, and that's where Watson gets his first try. But the one that I enjoyed the most, that we'll see later on, is the kick from Latrell Mitchell for Mitchell Pearce to score. The Tigers' missed tackles, 36-19, was probably the most evident stat. So when they gave the Roosters a crack, they really did give them every opportunity to score. The other standouts, I think, Maria Hargraves and Dylan Napa really laid the platform well up front for the Roosters, and we've seen Maria Hargraves with a try assist, and we'll see all these coming up. I didn't really have too many things to say around this game, other than the Roosters were quite disappointing at times and really took them a while to get going. But the Tigers, they just really need to make more of their opportunities when opposition sides are going to give them. But it ultimately comes down. I'll just pause now. This is a great try. Just let this play out. So yeah, for those listening, this is the Latrell Mitchell Pearce try. Just the vision that he has on the inside. Doesn't even get the best purchase on the ball. You see there, it's sort of corkscrewing a little bit, but then it just squares up. I think that's one of the things I love about rugby league, the shape of the ball. You just don't know what can happen at times, and if things go in your way, for some reason, the ball seems to do what you want it to do. So yeah, we'll sort of let these run out. It's starting to skip away. They had that 10-minute period, the Roosters, between about the 55th and the 65th minute. Up until about the 53rd minute, the Tigers were still in it, and then just that 10-minute period, they really went to sleep. 10-15 minute period, they went to sleep, and that's where the Roosters were able to put them away, because they stayed in the fight, and I think that's what, I guess, the one small positive that Cleary will take out of it. A bit of an opportunistic try there. Napa sort of coming up with an error there that Robinson would have been disappointed about. Probably a little bit more desperation, and put that down to the circumstances of the game, and maybe that desperation wasn't really needed to be exacerbated. But a 40-18 scoreline. The 40 points against the West Tigers probably wasn't really deserving. Or probably deserving is the wrong word. It probably wasn't on the cards. They probably shouldn't have let that happen, but they did let that happen, if that makes sense. Just disappointing for the Tigers. They after just losing to the Dragons last week, I really thought that they could have built on that, but the form that the Roosters are in and the key weapons that they've got, it just didn't prove to be enough strike power. So into our final game of the round yesterday, for the public holiday down there in New South Wales, we had the Bulldogs up against the Dragons, and the Doggies again with the upset as tips. So the Warriors and the Dogs were my upsets for the week, and they came away with that. Didn't end up having Josh Reynolds return from that hamstring injury as we first initially thought, so it just left the same. We see the Bulldogs fuck on up there. So we see the same halves pairing it in Frawley and Mbai. It was all the Bulldogs in this first 15-minute period. They had 80% of possession in the first 15 minutes and still weren't the first to score. It was the Dragons who led 2-0 after 20. We see Widdop knock one over there, and it sort of started to square up a little bit possession wise at the back end of this first half. But again, we just seen a little bit of lack of execution from both sides. The Dragons probably had more opportunities to score in the back end of this first half, and McGregor probably felt like they should have led by a little bit more coming into that first half, and had they sort of breached the line there, who knows, they probably go on to score some points in the first half outside of their lone penalty goal. So the big positive for Canterbury was the fact that they kept Dragons scoreless. So we see now they've only scored 3 tries in the last 2 weeks, the Dragons, and they just started to get on a roll. The big turning point for me, for the Bulldogs, was when Montoya took a screamer of a catch in the in goal, which earned his side a 20-metre restart. They then went 100 metres downfield, got a repeat set, which evidently led to 2 more sets. So they had three back-to-back sets. They built some pressure, but yeah, it was just a few poor defensive reads from Tane Milne that cost them. We'll see if we can get this one. Here we can see Milne was actually going to retreat back to his wing position and then just blocks Sims. So he came up with a few costly mistakes, and then he ended up getting sin-binned at the end. So I think that was more due to sheer frustration towards the end of the game. And Montoya probably got his just deserves there. We see him strike out. That's Tane Milne there, and he cops that sin bin. More out of frustration than anything. So yeah, the 2 key fuck-ups, Hamasele came up with an error coming out of their back end. And those errors, they just led to... I'll just switch this back over. Sorry, guys. Those errors just never really led to the Dragons getting inside the attacking 30 for the Dragons. But yeah, that was the key moment for me, was when Montoya takes that catching goal. They go the 100, get 3 repeat sets, which was also off the back of more Dragons errors. And then, you're making the opposition make 100 more tackles. They make 5 more errors. And they just capitalised a little bit better. It definitely wasn't the most gleamiest, prettiest win. 16-2 is very much indicative of a Bulldogs type victory, just gritty and sort of got what needed to be done. There was times there that the Dragons, they just couldn't get that last pass. I thought Thompson and Jack de Belin played really, really well. His involvements in that first half, Jack de Belin, were awesome. The offloads, the late offloads that he was getting were good. Some of the defensive reads that Widdop was making alongside Joel Thompson. There was one key tackle that he made on Adam Elliott, Gareth Widdop, which would almost have been scored against just about any other half in the game. There's not too many halves that would have made that tackle in the way that he did. But when they do that without execution, they're really struggling at the moment to come up with those points. And we're sort of noticing now that when they don't get those opportunities early, they sort of struggle to manufacture anything outside of that. Because I felt like the Dragons forwards had definitely done enough. We've seen Packer and Clemmer, they were going at it all afternoon. But yeah, they, for whatever reason, they just couldn't quite get that last pass to stick or build enough pressure with their fifth tackle options. And speaking of fifth tackle options, like, there was plenty of opportunities that the Bulldogs gave the Dragons as well. Like, some of the fifth tackle options that were used by Frawley and Mbai were terrible. Some kicks that were just sort of, it's fifth, so I've just got to boot the shit out of this ball, you know what I mean? And we did see in the highlights there where Dugan sort of takes that catch under the post, gets the quick tap, and nearly makes something of it. It was pleasing to see that the Dogs defended some of those poor choices, but at the same time, the people who are cleaning up those poor choices aren't the ones who are making the poor choices in the outset. And that's sort of coming back around to comments that I made earlier in other games where forwards are busting their ass to get XYZ results, but outside backs aren't returning the favour adequately. So, I think that was a bit of a story to be told for a lot of the losing sides. I felt pretty much every forward pack just about stood up, but it was a lack of execution across a number of areas that led to disappointing results for a lot of teams, and a few 13 plus blowouts, which we probably didn't see coming, and definitely didn't see a 13 plus win for the Warriors or the Bulldogs, despite tipping them for their victories. I didn't see them blowing out in quite that fashion. So, I know I haven't mentioned anything Origin in this, so we've seen 7 changes made for Queensland, and I don't want to delve too much in that. I'll probably just leave that for our Origin sort of preview next week. I'll tie that in somewhere. I might even make it just a separate podcast again, and then we'll do a bit of a breakdown. But yeah, all in all, I think it very much was explained quite well by Kevin Walters in the fact that this was the Plan B team for a lot of supporters and analysts of the game. It was probably the closer to the side that should have been picked for game 1 by a lot of people in their opinion. But the way Walters explained it was that the game 1 team selection was based more on giving them the opportunities because they had won in the past. Definitely didn't get the result game 1. We execute Plan B. So we see an unchanged Blues lineup for, I think I heard it was the first time they've been unchanged game 1 to 2 since 1996, so over a decade. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see a lot of pressure that sort of kicked back on them now to perform with a Queensland side who has arguably the 2 greatest Queensland players, at least in the last decade or so, come together, and the inclusion of Cooper and Hess, who are Thurston's back rowers, is a massive plus for the Cowboys. And when you throw Morgan on there and they start getting some partnerships going, I'm definitely a lot more confident now as a Queensland supporter that we can go down there and definitely square this series and bring it back up to Queensland for the decider. And I very much hope that's what happens. I think it would be very fitting for Thurston's last game in the Queensland jersey to come down to the wire, and he very much revel in that responsibility of coming out on top. So yeah, that's everything round 14. That's my little dab over the top of Origin football, but we'll delve more into that probably next week as we get out of the back end of round 15. So yeah, that's everything round 14. I hope you enjoyed the podcast. Again, I very much enjoy this process every week. You listening means the world to me. If you can continue to share that, help me grow it. That's all I can ask. But yeah, outside of that, guys, thank you very, very much for listening, and I look forward to hearing back any feedback that you've got for me. Otherwise, I'll be back online again come Friday morning. So we're on a shortened round this week. I think there's only 4 games due to Origin. So yeah, we'll cover everything round 15 on Friday. Alrighty, guys, have a great day.